Okay.
Over the main feed.
I'm out.
That was the whole episode.
That's
Wow.
it. I'm done now. For those who heard whatever you heard, you didn't hear shit. Don't ever talk about it ever again.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
We
it.
said none of that.
I said nothing was said unless you listen to the audio version of the podcast. Then you can hear that again.
Then you heard everything.
Then you heard everything that happened. Man, I guess let's just. Morning. Welcome to Don't Be the Artist. I'm Hagen.
I'm Dave.
I'm Adam.
And we're joined again
Another guest.
by another special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself, special guest. What's your name?
This is when I talk. It's now.
You're
Did
doing
I miss
great.
my cue?
You're doing
Let's
great.
try that. Let's try this.
Line.
Hold on. Morning. Welcome to Don't Be the Artist. I'm Hagen.
I'm Dave.
Adam.
And our special guest today is...
Chris Howell.
Yeah! Man, that was
Hi,
real.
Chris.
Yeah, let's give it up.
He's here.
That's amazing.
you so
That's amazing. Could you tell us?
Welcome to the morning radio show.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I feel so important.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? This will become more prevalent when we get into the main topic, but tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do.
Sure. My name is Chris. Thanks for having me.
I'm interrupting you. We don't
Okay.
say where we work on here.
We don't say where we work.
We don't say
yeah,
where
I should
we
have said
work.
that already.
Important.
but
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm unemployed. So there we have it.
Mutually.
I'm a trust fund baby.
We don't say where we work
Yeah.
mutually.
Yeah.
I'll be as cryptic as possible.
Well, just about how we know each other.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Understand.
Everything else you could say.
Oh, okay.
At your own discretion.
Oh, you're talking about. Oh man, that time.
Actually, would you
In Mexicali.
Would you say one time where we work? 3, 2, 1. We work at. But you didn't move your mouth, so it was a little.
This guy, I just wasn't ready for these jokes. I wasn't ready for these sound effects.
That's okay,
I'm
that's okay.
stunned. I'm overwhelmed.
That's how we catch people off guard.
It's
Yeah.
not hard to do with me.
The goal is not to make you comfortable.
Okay. Well,
It's
you're,
to-
yeah,
it's to keep
you're
you
all
on your
winning.
toes.
It's
I lure
3 to
you
1
in,
right
yeah.
now.
I lure you in with the old fashioned.
Yeah.
And then
I'm still coming out ahead because it's a really good old fashioned.
All right,
Well,
good.
I'm
Awesome.
happy.
Thank you.
This is
That's
2 weeks in a
amazing.
row, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks in a row, I've made a good old fashioned for the guest. Yeah. So, and then who knows? The next guest will get some fucking shit.
And then Dave gets nothing.
You got 2 mix.
I got 2 mix.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
There's another one down there.
So Chris, what do you do?
I am it's hard to explain what I do because I have like 17 jobs.
Okay.
But most often, I am a recording engineer and producer at my studio here in Denton. Can I say the name of my studio? or
That
not?
would be up to you.
Okay. At Café Solo Studios in Denton, Texas. I'm also a guitarist. So I do a lot of session work at my studio for other people, and I also play for a country artist named Gary Kyle, who's also a really good friend of mine. So I play most weekends. I play with him, and those are my main jobs: is recording and producing music and playing guitar. And I also write my own music.
Does your friend Gary need a drummer and a bass player?
Let me text him. Hold on.
So what you're saying is we're really lucky that you were able to fit us into your schedule.
Yeah.
I think the honor is mine to be here on among such an august group of wonderful human beings.
That's too kind. That's too kind.
I don't know what I just said, but it's
Yeah,
I was going to say, I think it was kind. He
Way
said
too
some
kind.
words
I think
there.
you have to leave now.
Said
Could
some-
someone look up the meaning of August?
No.
Okay.
No. We're just going to trust you.
I was hoping
we don't.
it
We
was
don't
right.
have what's the guy's name on fucking Joe Rogan. We don't have him.
You don't have a guy?
We don't have a guy.
We don't have a guy
Jamie.
for that.
Jamie. Yeah, we don't have a Jamie. Yeah. It really.
Dave's
would be
looking it up right
all
now.
of us are.
Dave
are
wants to be
Jamie.
that guy.
Do you want to be the Jamie of the show? You just look everything up.
I can't wait to know what
No.
I said.
Just tell us that we say something wrong.
He sounded so concerned. No. I don't.
Respected and impressive. I mean, you
No,
nailed
that's
it.
not what I was thinking.
Oh.
Sorry.
What were you
Damn
thinking?
it.
You want to try
I
again?
tried. I did
We
my
can go
best.
back to the very beginning. We can rewind this
Can
whole
you
thing.
edit that?
Um,
Can you go back and
Well,
bleep
we
that?
could, but do
We can say we're going to.
You know what I do a lot is not edit the show.
Oh, man.
I do different editing, but for most of this, I don't edit shit.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a great job.
It is being producer and just like pressing go and then like, all right, whatever happens.
I'm an expert.
I
at that.
usually check to see if the beginning of the show sounds okay and if the end of the show sounds okay. If both of those are good, I'm good to go.
Yeah, if there's a problem in between, we won't know for a couple days.
Yeah,
Until we get an email.
Yeah.
it's all good.
Yeah, whatever. I don't
Tell the
give a
police
shit.
show up.
I don't give
Yeah.
a shit. All right, story time. Okay, my turn. So this past week, I played the House of Blues in Dallas. It was great. And had a great time, whatever that was, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. That part of the story's done. Now, here's the part I'm going to get to. So when we got paid out from the gig, I have officially benefited from the Willie Nelson on the road again. Do you remember this, Adam?
Yeah.
Do you remember this
Yeah.
like this Willie Nelson on the road again
Right,
like
the
thing?
Ticketmaster like good PR machine thing.
Exactly.
Do you know about that? Have you heard about this?
I do not.
Yeah.
So as a refresher, and for you, Chris, basically partnering with like Live Nation and Ticketmaster, Willie Nelson started a program that's basically to help musicians on the road because Live Nation and Ticketmaster consistently fucks musicians on the road by
Yes, they do.
taking like merch sales
Right.
and whatever, right? So they basically did the little PR like pat on the back, this will make it better by giving artists certain things and like certain extra things, such as in my case, I received a gas gift card, a gift
Wow.
card for Shell for gas. Now, the amount of money that's on that gift card is kind of hilarious. It is like more than they should give just me who lives in the DFW who's playing at Dallas. But the interesting thing was we all got one. Every single member.
Well,
of
you guys all drove separate cars there, separate
guess
tour
that's why they
buses.
did
Didn't
that.
matter. It was
Yeah.
people, separate tour buses. I got to take my tour bus in for an oil
Yeah.
change soon.
So I've officially benefited from the Willie Nelson
Tax
on-
credit.
So that's what they're doing is giving you gas cards.
Yeah, here I'll show you.
Okay.
Again, it's Willie Nelson's.
What do they
much-
do if
much
you play
needed-
This is
like
my prop.
what do they do if you play like a venue in New York where like everybody just took the subway to get there?
That's my prop. So you can take a look at that.
Oh my god!
That's amazing.
It's nice and branded.
Yeah, it's for sure branded. Yeah, branded by everything.
Can I see that?
It says on the
On
road
the road
again.
again, and then it has a big Shell logo on it.
Well, because they're probably
Wow.
they're probably getting something.
They're
for
giving
it.
a lot of money.
It's a lot
for
of
that.
gas.
It couldn't
Yeah.
have been like. I wish it was like Quick Trip. Shell's friggin' expensive.
And that's gonna go away real fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like
They
half
want.
a tank
Yeah.
in your car, in your
Okay.
tour bus.
Yeah, in my tour bus.
Yeah, yeah.
Which,
Are you a
which,
Quick Trip fan? Are they the best?
I mean, or Sam's Club.
Yeah.
I get my gas at Sam's Club. You get your gas at Sam's Club.
And
Hagen.
Quick Trip.
And Quick Trip.
Yeah, I do quite like Quick Trip. Interestingly, yes, the Shell. You said my tour van.
Mm-hmm.
We have toured in my car, so it is.
It counts. It
kinda
classifies
like
as
a
a tour
tour
van.
van.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean,
we,
for tax purposes.
we fit all of the all of moniker in the car.
And little guy in the back.
Jackson, little guy in the back seat. That's how we make it work.
Yeah.
That's how we make it work. And Jackson has to break my iPad for it to work as well.
Yep.
But yeah, that's my story time because it was relevant to what we talked about in the past. Dave, you want to talk about your gig this weekend?
I played a wedding gig. And thank you. They both said yes.
That's good. That's a good
Damn,
wedding.
that could have been some fucking tea right
Sign of
there.
a
I
good
didn't even
wedding.
think
Actually,
that was
yeah.
gonna be a fucking.
Has that come up
No,
when you've been in the
the only thing I've heard of was a friend of mine on another gig was playing trumpet, and during the ceremony, it was like, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah.
And the babysitter / nanny of the groom was like, I'm the one that should be with him, and interrupted the entire
Wow.
service.
Wow,
and
that's
It's memorable.
a twist.
pretty crazy.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bro, that's insane.
That's insane,
that
right?
sounds fake as fuck. That's wild. Holy shit.
No,
Okay.
my gig was frustrating because I actually had to put work in to get ready for it.
Oh man.
I ended up with a playlist, and I'm not going to show you, Chris, because you'll just believe me. But I ended up with a playlist
will.
of 118 songs
Wow.
that I had to have ready.
Was this Jack White's band? Or
No,
what?
no, but the set list,
How long did y'all have to play?
3 hours.
And
That's-
there was a potential.
There
of
was a
100
potential
yeah.
of.
That's like 40 songs. Though.
Oh, I know. And so the guy that runs the band is also a bass player, was on a different gig, and he just said that's the set list he sends out.
Oh,
And so
man.
I didn't want to message him and go, do I really got to learn all this?
Yeah.
Like, because you have a main set list, you have a dinner set list, and then there's separate set lists for all the regular singers and songs they might want to do.
Mm.
And so I was like,
Wow.
I'll make sure I can play all of them.
Yeah. God damn, dude. That's
Yeah.
insane.
But I nailed it.
That's
not
what
surprised.
I wanted you to get. This you said this was like redemption, right?
Yeah, it was redemption because
Yeah.
the first time I did it, I didn't nail it, and it didn't go well, and I had a horrible time.
And then now
And now I had a
he's
great
on
time.
top of the fucking world.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
yeah,
It's good shit.
yeah.
We're so proud of you, Dave.
Well, and the guy that runs the band that I normally play in called me and was like, "Hey, how'd the gig go?" I was like, "I fucking nailed it, but I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to play in the band that I'm actually in."
That's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fair. Adam, did you play any gigs this weekend?
Yeah, definitely. As the non-musician here, I played a bunch of gigs. What do you guys do? You know, you didn't get a gift card, so I guess it's not real.
Yeah. You got to make sure you get the gas gift card for it to count. For
It'd be great if it had like a signature on the back and it says Willie Nelson.
Fuck, dude, that would actually
That would
why
that would
didn't
be
they
kind
do
of neat.
that?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That would be awesome. Ian in the chat said, "How much is a gallon in Denton?" I don't know how to convert that to Canadian, so we're gonna move past that.
Yeah, we
Dave's
go.
thinking about it.
Well, we go by gallons here, but they go by liters there.
yeah, I don't know how to
I
convert.
think he
that.
just wants to know like what's the price.
What's a gallon?
I know that's what he wants to know.
About
I'm making sure Dave-
$3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's like $80 Canadian.
That's good.
It's, 80 Trudeau bucks.
All right, 80 Trudeau. Dude, just coming in,
We're political now,
let's
dude.
well, we did that one episode.
We did it
Yeah.
a couple
We
weeks
did
ago.
that one
Yeah.
episode
Yeah.
that was all politics.
That was
Yeah.
it. That,
Yeah.
we're done for the month. That was it.
Oh, okay.
We can only do one politics episode a month.
Yeah.
Did you get more ratings on that podcast?
No.
I don't think so. Turns out our audience doesn't want to hear that.
No.
Stark
man.
contrast. Very
No.
low.
We got a lot of views on the Wilco episode, which we did
Yeah.
last week.
Yeah.
But the politics episode seemed to be less interesting.
Okay.
Who would have thought?
Man.
Not me.
Not me.
Ian said that's 680 here. 680 Trudeau.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Speaking of Canada, there's going to be a Tim Hortons here soon.
Is it the second one, right?
The second one, yeah,
It's
but
the second-
close to us.
What is
Within,
Tim Hortons?
within a reasonable amount for me to go, I'll go there.
You'll go check out.
And I
yeah.
expect the doors to open and harps to be playing and Tim Horton himself to go, "Come here, my son."
Is he alive?
No,
What is Tim Hortons?
it's the Canadian Starbucks.
Oh,
And is it
Canadian,
good?
Canadian
No.
Dunkin'.
No, the
Canadian
donut.
what?
Canadian Dunkin'.
Canadian
Dunkin',
Dunkin'. That's
okay.
better.
Okay, yeah,
That's
yeah,
better.
yeah, okay, yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's definitely trashier.
I've
Yeah,
been
yeah.
to Canada a couple of times.
Yeah. Well, you might have been to a Tim Hortons and not even
I
known
think
it.
it sounds familiar.
They don't have donut holes. They have Timbits.
Sure, they do.
Not to be confused with Tim's Bits.
But I'm just going
That
to let
guy's
that
not allowed
joke
in
write
there
itself.
It's like I don't know, man. Why do you guys have such weird words for shit?
I don't know. We have. Do you know the name of our $2 coin, Chris?
The loony.
The $2 one. Do you know that one?
No, that's the only Canadian trivia I know.
Can you guess? If the $1 coin's named the Looney,
Mm-hmm.
the $2 coin is $2. What would we have named it?
You almost said it.
What's the dumbest thing we could have named it in
The
Canada?
two loony.
Almost.
Oh man,
That's almost.
I think I like
It's-
mine better already.
It's the toonie.
the toonie. Okay.
The fucking toonie.
damn. Canada's on one.
I can't wait until we get the
That's,
three-knee.
The three-knee?
That's
Well, that's like what my favorite video game as a kid was Banjo Kazooie, and then they came out with the sequel. And it was
Banjo-Kazooie?
No, Banjo Tooie.
Oh.
That sounds like
So-
some
Wow.
Canadian naming.
And then all the fans of Banjo Kazooie were like, "Where's Banjo 3E? We just thought that we just knew." And then they just never released Banjo 3E. They changed the name for the third one.
It's coming with Half-Life 3 or whatever.
The third one did come out. Half-Life 3
Oh, I
is not
didn't
out.
know that.
Yeah. And we're also not talking about video games here
Yeah.
because
Not the right show for that.
that's for me and our old host.
It's your other podcast.
Miss you, Jackson. Okay, so today we are here. So for those who don't know, we are sometimes trying to decide a topic, and it takes us a while.
Yeah.
It takes us some time to figure out what we want to talk about because we've been doing this podcast for how long? Right,
Oh,
too long. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
And
Almost 300 episodes.
yeah, that's a long time.
Or
yeah,
Man.
300
Yeah.
episodes.
yeah, it's got to be about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
6-7 years, yeah.
And so sometimes it's like, well, we kind of have talked about this already. So I don't really.
I mean, we've accidentally done a topic that we already had done. And I only found out because I named the files when I upload them, and there was a conflict. So
and that's pretty cool.
turns out we
Do
did
you want
that.
to replace this file?
Yeah. You're like, shit.
And I was like, oh, maybe I already
Oops.
uploaded this. Oh, no. Nope.
Yeah.
It's from 2019.
So so we it sometimes takes us a little bit of time to figure something out, and when it comes to some like broad spectrum ideas musically, it's like we've talked about the idea of like rock music, we've talked about these broad terms, and I think some terms that come up a lot, particularly one of these that's like a broad term idea musically, is the word producer. And so we thought we would actually bring on someone who is that and
Who purports to be one.
can set the fucking record straight.
Oh man, no pressure.
But I think it would be good for us to kind of talk about what a producer means to each one of us. That term, musical producer. So Adam, when you hear that someone produced a record, what does that mean to you?
I feel like usually it comes across as their influence and their, things that influence them come across in that music. So like my example is Foo Fighters working with a new producer. The record's going to sound different. Obviously still sounds like the band, but there's a new influence there. Like a new existing member is joining the band.
Okay. And before Dave goes, if you're in the chat right now, please feel free to drop in what you define as a music producer. We'd love to hear from you as well. Dave.
I like the romantic idea of it being like an extra member of the band, helping push the band in a different direction or helping to push them to do something generally better.
Okay. Yeah. I think I sit somewhere like in the middle there, right? Like I feel like a producer is someone who kind of tends to help guide the musicians in the studio to get to the finished product, and whether or not it be to like challenge them or just like kind of push, not push, but like use their influences to help them get there or use their skills to help them get there. That to me feels like what a lot of times a music producer is or can be. Now, Chris, tell us why we're wrong.
Chris,
Oh man.
what is a producer?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I looked it up on Wikipedia, on Wikipedia before I got here. And hold on, I need to memorize. I need to read it real quick. No, I think first of all, to the extent that I'm qualified to answer that is up for debate. But for the purposes of this podcast, I'll play along. I think you're all right. And again, I don't speak from a position of like, I know the answer, because I think part of the reason why there's diversity in the answers is because that term is a fluid term. And it's because as is the case oftentimes with a lot of creative roles, what does it mean to be a guitarist in the band? It means something. Sometimes it means the same thing, and sometimes it's different, or the singer, or whatever. I just think that anytime you're talking about a creative role, the reason why we struggle with defining it is because it is fluid, and it can take on different characteristics depending on the context. But in general, all the things you've mentioned, I think, are absolutely right. And we could talk about this for hours. We should get together and talk about this sometime. I think, that there's so many directions that question could go in. But for me, I guess to try to distill it, I think the producer is someone who does do the things that you mentioned, like is kind of, for the purposes of the recording, he or she really does become like can become like another member of the band.
Right.
Because they're giving voice, they're giving shape to a recording. And it helps to kind of see the recording as like, okay, this is kind of like an aural, like, AURAL photograph of the band at a particular point in time. This is what they sounded like. And not only because when you go back and look at yourself in the past, like that's what I looked like in
Well, it's more like
2017.
that's what I looked like.
Yeah, it's like, or like, that's what I look like. Yeah. No, it's like,
as we age, I go, oh, I look like that, and I wasted that.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Exactly. But it's like, it's a recording, the way I see it, is like just kind of like it's capturing a moment, or a short period of time, relatively speaking, in the life of a band or an artist. And that's the producer's kind of just being an instrumental part of figuring out what the band sounds like at that time. And that's why like recordings can have a certain style or personality, or this album sounds like that or like that. And it could be any number of things, but a lot of times if you have a good producer, he or she is going to be there to kind of help the band maximize its potential, for lack of a better term. Sounds a little bit cliche. Another way I like to think about it is all the musicians come into the studio with their areas of expertise, either songwriting or singing or playing or whatever it is, and they're playing their instruments. And the producer really is playing the studio. Because when a band comes into a studio, a lot of times songs change and evolve. They become something that is different than the practice room or the demo. And hopefully it's a better version of that. But the producer really, their job is to kind of help figure out what is the best possible version that this song can be, given the limitations and the resources that we have and who's here. How can I make this the best? And how can I use the resources of the studio, which sometimes are unknown or just unfamiliar to the musicians playing. Maybe not as much now, back in the olden days when, you had to go to a studio with, 2-inch tape to record, and not everybody had a studio in their spare bedroom or in their backyard like me. I mean, maybe it was a little bit more of an arcane or esoteric experience because you were going to the studio, and it's not something now I think, and which I think is a good thing. Recording is a lot more. There's a lot more readily available. People can do a lot. People can do wonderful recordings with very limited equipment. So maybe the recording process is a little more familiar to people, but historically, I think when you get at least into bigger studios, you don't realize what all you can do in a studio, and I think that's another role of a studio is to go, oh, this person's good at that, this person's good at that, this person's not good at that, so I need to maximize the strengths, minimize the weaknesses, and also harness what the sound that the band is going for. I'm going to keep talking until someone interrupts me because this never ends.
So in your position,
I don't know what I said. I'm glad you recorded that because I have no idea what I said.
You're gonna like it. You spoke very well.
God.
When you think about generally how you find your role as a producer in your studio, it kind of sounds like you're saying it's also doubly as much engineer.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are distinct skill sets. I think, again, that's on a continuum as well. You have producers like Rick Rubin, who admittedly doesn't apparently even know how to operate the soundboard, but he's a genius, so no one cares because his ideas are wonderful.
He knows how to ride the faders.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Okay.
And
but he's not an engineer.
He doesn't understand what the knobs on the board mean.
But he knows when something sounds
good.
And he's admittedly just a genius.
And he's not a musician.
Too. He self-admittedly is.
Yeah.
He says that weekly.
Well, maybe so. I enjoy listening to him. But yeah. I think
confusing Rick Rubin for Kanye again.
I was not.
No,
not you. I'm talking about Hagen.
No. Those are two different examples. Just listening to Rick Rubin talk, it's like, oh man, I know. Like when he talks about like the stuff he's made, it's like, oh dude, I think that you would love to smell your farts. I bet he fucking knows exactly where the fader should go on his own farts, and that's cool. I got no problem with that.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous of that actually.
Yeah.
No, I think there's a distinction between a producer and engineer, but again, that's a continuum. And I think some producers are very adept at engineering, and some aren't, and some engineers have really great producer type ideas and personalities, and it's kind of a fluid relationship. A lot of times really good producers work with a particular engineer that understands them, knows exactly, like they know the language, and that like go in there and do what you know I want you to do, and that's a team kind of thing. But they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I tend to gravitate personally more towards production than engineer, because I feel like the term engineer in my world is reserved for someone who actually makes the equipment that I use. Like, I don't know how to build a compressor. I can't take it apart and just fix it all. I can do a basic repair on it. But I'm like, the person who can make the microphones and all that stuff, that's an audio engineer. It's an elevated term for me to call myself an audio engineer. But since people know what I mean when I say that most of the time, I mean, I know how to work my studio and I know how to work a compressor, but I don't know how to build one. So I think those terms get thrown around, but it's important to clarify this is what each is doing.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification, because a lot of times, like especially at the level that like I can at least speak for myself on this, but a lot of times that like I'm in a studio, there's one person. There's one person doing the producing and the engineering, and it's rare that like I encounter like the two different roles happening. And
but also that's also a function of budget, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Because when you want to hire a big name producer, then you're going to pay for it, and then most of the time, the engineer, if he or she is competent, then they can kind of wear both hats. But also sometimes bands, that's probably I'm sure it's one of the many questions we can get to. Bands don't want a producer, or they don't know that they need a producer, or what they should do, what a producer does.
I think that's kind of like one of the big things that I definitely, especially younger bands, that I kind of want to dive into a little bit. But real quick too, like the idea, like I've worked with a lot of people who it's you walk into the studio, the drums were leftover mic'd from the last session, and they walk in and just go, yep, still good, and they don't even they don't fuck with it, and it's like and it's not to say that's not like a slight at anybody. They just went in and when the mics are on it. Okay, cool, call it a day. Let's record it and see what happens. And like to me that like. Well, personally, I just like that kind of vibe a lot, more than just like the precision of like, especially for drum miking. I'm like, fuck, this is so, I hate this.
Sometimes you hear the stories of like, day one was finding drum sounds.
Yeah.
Dude, kill me.
And as I always like to joke, the first 30 minutes of day 2 was plugging the bass in.
And
going, okay, good, let me hear some bass. Boom. Good, we got it.
Yeah.
All right, let's do
DI
it.
should we use?
Exactly.
Okay, here are your choices.
Which when I got to work with you, Hagen and I both got to work in your studio, which was amazing. It's
great.
But I was just like, I have a compressor pedal, and you were like, go ahead and turn that off. Yeah, you're like, good job, Dave.
No, not at all. I think honestly that's a sign of a good producer, is to go to kind of figure out, okay, what sound are you wanting, and what equipment do you have? What equipment do I have? And what's the best thing that's going to make this song sound like we want it together to sound? And as a producer, since it's my job in some ways to kind of know gear and know what it's supposed to do, maybe I can go, oh, did you know that on the recording you just brought up to me that they actually used this amp and this bass or whatever? And so maybe it's like just some of the knowledge is one of the things that a producer brings to a situation.
Okay, so a question that I have that's a little more on the personal side. Is
You didn't say there was going to be any personal questions on this podcast.
Deal with it.
Okay.
So I have a very vivid memory of working with a producer for a long time. His name's Brack. He's been on the show before. He's a great guy. He used to have a studio in Denton. Now he's a farmer in Oklahoma. And
wow.
Yeah.
Let us know
Quite
when
the
you start
career
gathering
change.
your stuff to go to
Okay,
your...
I never considered that. but
It was
maybe-
that man became a farmer. Like,
No, it
just
was
like,
it was a
wow.
rapid change.
Yeah. It's like he moved to Oklahoma. Now he's a farmer. It's great. Anyway,
Okay,
so so I asked him once because we were at UNT together. He was doing classical guitar, I was doing classical voice, and so I knew what classes he was taking because I was taking the same shit. And obviously, like we're like, you know, we learn stuff outside of what we were learning in school, obviously, but the amount of knowledge and understanding he had of just listening to something and knowing, like you said, like what amp, what compressor, oh, this has this, these kinds of effects things. How do you get to that point where your ear can hear all those kinds of things? And like, was it ear training? Was it listening to a lot of music? What was that process like?
It just makes shit up because they're paying you a bunch of money. So you just act like you know what you're talking about. It's like, oh, that was an 1176 blue stripe. I mean, I'm like, no,
There's
wait,
nobody there to fact check you.
So have you
Exactly.
been in studio settings where someone will say some shit like that and you're like, get a load of this person. That is not
what an
right
asshole.
at all.
No.
I think there was a 12-string
No, it was a black face amp, not a silver face twin. What the fucking
You're
shit
like,
are you doing
you're like,
here?
yo, I was on that session.
Yeah, no, I was there. To answer your question seriously, which is always a challenge for me.
Well, you're on the right show.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think if someone is going to present themselves as a producer, then obviously that kind of presumes that they have a certain amount of experience as well as ability, even though despite how old you are, how long you've been doing it. And I think as a producer, one of the things you do is you consume music, not only just for the love of it and the aesthetic enjoyment of it, but you learn, you consume music to try to figure out how did they make that? How did that happen? And you go to different studios and you develop relationships with other producers and other engineers and studios in town. Like I feel like I have a really good relationship with most of the studios in town. I think I do. Maybe they would. So, no, I think you connect with people. You talk. You go see bands live. You invest in the music scene, and you kind of become a little bit of like just a music nerd. Like you all are.
Whoa.
Because, I know, shots fired.
I wear that with pride.
Because I think that helps you become that it gives you something else to offer to the band and help them figure out where they're trying to go. So yeah, I don't purport to have I certainly don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of, studio gear and recordings, but I do know the stuff that I listen to. I'm like, I'm interested. Like I'll read about it, or I'll try to find out, or I'll research it, or I'll, talk to people on forums and, and things like that. You just kind of immerse yourself in the community and find people who do know what they're talking about and learn from them and try to just explore, like kind of be a little bit of a historian, about the kind of music that you like to make, so that when bands, bring you an album, even if you don't know, you could probably figure out, okay, well, that kind of sounds like that. Maybe I can do some research on this, or I can know, what do I know about a band that they listen to and what were they trying to go for? So I think it's just part of your skill set is to be educated about what you're trying to do.
I know you've had a lot of different genres of music being recorded at your studio.
Yeah.
Has there been a particular genre where you were like, oh, there's gonna be a big learning curve here?
Oh man. You're
Tell us
basically
your
asking him
weaknesses.
what do I suck at?
Yeah.
There's how long is this
not
podcast?
not necessarily, but like
What you used to suck at, and then you got better.
Oh,
That's
nice
what he
save.
wants. Yeah.
Well to go. An area of growth for me. No, so I tell people I'm best at, and this is going to sound a little bit, I don't mean this to sound condescending or elitist, but maybe I'm just that way. I am best at recording like people playing instruments in a room and putting microphones in front of them. And that's my approach to recording that I'm probably best at. I'm not as good at like a lot of rap and hip hop and electronic type music and MIDI stuff. I've grown quite a bit. Thank you very much. About how to use the MIDI editor in Pro Tools.
Nice.
Because it has applications way beyond just certain genres of music. It's actually very helpful for all different kinds of music, especially doing pre-production and stuff like that. But I'm not typically good at that genre of music because I don't listen to a lot of it. I respect it quite a bit, but I'm not naturally good at that. So I've had to learn. You know, when someone comes in, like sometimes they'll bring stuff in and it's mostly electronic, and a lot of times they'll do a lot of that themselves. Like they'll program beats or they'll work with someone, and then a lot of times they're coming in to do vocals or some drums or something they can't do on their own. And so I'll learn from them as well. It's like, oh, cool, show me your session. How did you do that? Okay, what plugin is that? And what kind of controller are you? I mean, that's part of the great thing about working in studios. I learn as much as I, do.
But not every producer will do that. I'm
Yeah.
sure there are studios and
Right. Some like producers like pigeonhole themselves. And
they'll go,
For sure.
sorry, I'm not doing that.
Now, I think you brought up something great, which is like rap and hip hop kind of stuff, and I think that really kind of is part of the crux of this conversation in my head, which is take rap, hip hop, EDM. The term producer means something totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
Beat producer.
Sure.
Or track producer.
So I don't none of this conversation I think should be, I should just say this now. It's not meant to sound as a slight to those people who are doing that,
No.
or as any sort of like disrespect. As I'm going to use my brother as an example, because my brother, who's been on the show before, he wakes up every day and makes a beat. Like that's his thing, and he is a producer, right? But it's a different kind of thing. Now, I would say yes, beat producer, but like you take someone like I don't know, I'm thinking of these old heads like Deadmau5 and Skrillex, but like
Right. It's like having the same level of knowledge about the same thing just digitally.
yeah, exactly. Because you could take the whole image of a song of a track. They call it a track, and you can like get the entire thing done with one person, and that is the producer of that. And it's also the artist, which is like kind of where my like confusion lies, because I do think they are the producer, but this becomes the like what makes them, like, do they bring someone else in? Is it just them? There's so many layers to that to define that term.
And that's where, like I said, the term producer is just necessarily a fluid term. I mean, it does it has some roles that are consistent across genres, and sometimes, a producer on a country album is going to be different than a producer on, a folk album, or like you said, an EDM album. They may have different roles. And it may depend on, and of course, it depends on the artist as well. So I think that's fair. Like the term producer is hard to pin down because it covers a lot of bandwidth.
Can you guys think of an album or an artist that when they worked with a specific producer, either it fully changed them or it was like just the right thing? I'm sure we can think of a lot of them, but I'll use Ian in the chat as an example. Ian said Mark Ronson producing Queens was the artist-producer collab I didn't know I needed, which is one of those situations where it's like, oh, wow, I would have never thought that. Why did we do? It's great. It's awesome. Are there any examples of like this didn't work or this did? Like let's start with this did work, either surprisingly or not surprisingly. Like this collaboration was perfect.
Chris? I have an example if you want to still think about it.
I'm thinking.
I think Tom Petty working with Rick Rubin for the I think it was at least Wildflowers. But before Rick Rubin, I think he was working with I forget his name, but the guy the producer he was working with previous to him, and you probably know his name. He was recording a single snare drum and then a single hi-hat and then like a tom and getting a tom sound. And it was really, really meticulous. And then Tom Petty was like, I'm going to record a solo record. I want to work with Rick Rubin. And Rick Rubin was like, as we discussed, is not that kind of a producer. He's not an engineer. He doesn't play any music. He's just like, let me hear the songs, man. And I think that contrast worked really well for Tom Petty.
Okay, this is going to be a little obscure. Welcome to me. But also, I'm also dating myself because I grew up listening to 90s rock, and that's one of my favorite, if that's a definable genre of music. There's a band I really love from Houston named King's X. They've been around a long time, and they were on Atlantic Records, and they were doing their own. They had a guy that would kind of a friend of theirs produce their first few albums, and then on their fourth album, they had this guy named Brendan O'Brien come in and produce. He's probably one of my favorite all-time producers.
He produced my favorite Incubus records.
Oh, yeah? Well, he's produced there are bands that I don't even like, but if I found out he produced their album, I'll go listen to it, and I wind up liking it. Because his approach to production is basically who I want to be. It is the most natural, organic, like you're in there, the band is standing in front of you playing. It's that vivid to me. All the sounds you can hear, everything, the way it's put together is so creative. And he produced I was saying this band, their fifth album. And the sound of that album is completely different than everything that came before it. It sounded weird at first. It was a complete direction change for them. The tones on it they did it at Southern Tracks, which is a studio in Atlanta. And it's basically the album I put in to like calibrate speakers in my studio.
That's
because
great.
I know that album backwards and forwards, and it's so well recorded and mixed. You can hear literally everything. Everything is in this sound field where it needs to be. It feels like they're standing in the room with you playing it. And I think, that collaboration for me, which it brought, because they're such good musicians, it went from like overdubbing everything and tracking layers and layers of parts to basically doing almost like 80 to 90% of the album live in the studio, which was a complete like, what?
Wow.
Because a lot of times in really produced sounding albums, a lot of times you're layering parts, you're layering vocals and guitar, and sometimes nobody's playing at once. Sometimes it's drum day, and then it's bass day, and the guitar. But he was like, nope, y'all are such a live band, and you're so good at your respective instruments that we're going to track this whole thing live. And they did, I think, pretty much except for the lead vocals. They did almost the whole thing and guitar solos live. And that album just rips my face off in a good way.
So you're saying
every time.
Les Paul ruined music.
I'm not saying Les Paul. I think Les Paul was a genius, and I'm benefiting from his creativity to this day. But I think there's something about also when a band is really tight, when you capture that live in the studio, there's something about that.
Yeah. Both examples that we gave were when producers let bands record live.
There you go.
I mean,
I mean, I feel like that's a big deal. If
That
you
is-
haven't
if you have
been
a good
used to doing
band.
that.
If it's a band, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
as
such a
opposed to
big
like,
deal.
and I don't mean that in a disparaging sense,
Yeah,
but if
yeah.
it's like a band, like this is the sound is these people, as opposed to like, oh, this is an artist coming in and we're bringing in
Right.
people, which is, I mean, that can work live as well. But I think especially when bands like, their sound is contingent upon the personnel.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like them if it's not those people, then tracking them live, and if they're good and rehearsed, then that's a great way to go about it.
Well, with
Yeah.
the Rick Rubin example, I feel like that's kind of his go-to. Seems like it, where he's like, "We're just going to do it live," and that works for a lot of bands,
Yeah.
or a lot of bands that he's worked with, rather. But
Yeah.
The surprise one is also Rick Rubin for me, which is Volume 3, Slipknot.
Yeah.
That's like that one's such like a that's the album that got me into Slipknot. It's the album that's like it's one of the most important metal albums for me, like forever. And like that's such a bizarre like pairing.
Yeah, that album worked for you.
Yeah.
Did not work for Slipknot.
Or Slipknot fans.
They hated working with Rick
Yeah, they
Rubin.
hated it. Yeah, I just read a quote because I was like, I'm pretty sure it was Volume 3. I'm going to double check myself before I say it on microphone. And and it was Corey Taylor talking about how they would like play a song and Rick Rubin would. This is a quote from Corey Taylor. He would lay back in the couch and be like, "Do it again," rub his beard, and then fall asleep. Which like I would honestly theorize that it's like that's like a strategy Rick Rubin went into recording Slipknot, which is like let's just see if I can just really
just
fucking
irritate them.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Yeah.
their experience before that was visceral and brutal and violent in the studio. And so to go in and work with like this massive producer and he's just like, whatever. Like that's a great strategy to go in with. That's perfect.
And they were like, we're never working with him again.
Yeah.
Maybe that means it worked though.
Yeah. That album is a fucking hit. Like
Imagine paying all that money, like paying for a really like supposedly the world's best chiropractor, and they don't even touch your back.
yeah.
They're just like,
They just get you really mad.
how's your back feel now?
Yeah, yeah. Ian in the chat said he threw potted plants at them. If that's in relation to Slipknot, that feels like nothing compared to the first couple albums where like
No, that feels like just
those
keeping
were-
continuity.
Yeah, yeah.
They were probably soft. I think he might be saying that the Slipknot's first producer.
Oh yeah. Which is for sure.
like,
Yeah.
throwing potted plants and things like that.
So
Not my tempo.
not my tempo. Yeah, for sure. Not my Slipknot tempo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I recognize that
Joey.
reference.
Yeah. Hey, Joey Jordison, would you play faster,
Yeah,
bitch? Come on. Adam, do you have any producer like artist combos? It's like holy fucking shit.
Maybe not quite so much that, but more of like made a clear influence. So I mean, I think everybody knows who listens to the podcast. Big fan of Dave Bowie. I think the
yeah.
Brian Eno influence, not necessarily, I don't think as a credited producer on the Berlin trilogy, but very much an influence of a producer type role
Yeah.
with Bowie's longtime producer. It's like that changed his trajectory for the rest of his career, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I think that's an example of like just bring somebody new in who can be involved in the process, basically be a member of the band and equal partner in this
Yeah.
case, and just like change everything about it.
Now, I do want to go into like the opposite realm, which is there like an artist and producer that's like this just doesn't work that you can think of. But before that, I want to expand on that because like there are artists, and I think this is a good thing and a bad thing. There are artists and bands when they work with other producers. I'm like, please don't, please just work with the person that you've like.
Like things are going well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my favorite band, Between the Buried and Me, works with Jamie King, their producer, on every album except for fucking one. And I love that album still, but you can hear it, you can tell.
Which album?
Great Misdirect.
Oh, really?
Well, so they did part of it without him. They did like half of it at a different studio with a different producer, and then they did the other half with Jamie King.
Can you notice it?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And like because you can watch all of like the producer like the studio videos they recorded, and those are at Jamie King, but then like there's stuff that they didn't post that wasn't there, and they had a really bad time, and I can it's just so yeah. I have like there are artists that like if they go work with someone else, I'm like, please, why? Like, why are you doing this? Because I would love for you to just stay here, and maybe I think that's a problem with me, but like I'm sure you guys think of plenty of artists that like they have their producer. If they go somewhere else, it's like wonder why, please don't kind of thing.
Well, and I mean, the most notable pairing has got to be George Martin and the Beatles.
Oh yeah.
It has to be, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if they had lasted much longer, who else they would have worked with.
I was certain you were going to bring up I forget his name every time, but the Jason Isbell's producer who also
Dave Cobb.
Dave Cobb. Yeah, I was certain you were going to bring up
His
Dave Cobb.
his recordings are he's that same artist for me where anything I know that he was the producer on, I'm like I'm going to listen to that record.
Yeah.
Even if I don't necessarily like the artist.
What was the one we listened to a couple Fridays ago?
It was very surprising.
And it was Dave Cobb produced. Oh, it was Ben Platt.
Yeah,
it was
Ben
Ben Platt.
Platt.
And we listened to it, and I think I've heard you say this every single time we listen to Dave Cobb production. You go, oh, that's why you can hear the bass.
Yeah. Yeah. Clear as day.
Yeah.
And I think I was like, this sounds like I wonder who the producer is because it sounds like a Dave Cobb
Right.
Yeah.
production.
Yeah.
And it fucking is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a I would never want it's the same thing as like when an artist changes their sound. I'm like, I don't want the artist to feel like they have to like for their fans' sake, like stay in this one zone. But like, man, there's sometimes where it's a I know that when Queens went to go work with Mark Ronson, like Ian said in the chat, there's a lot of people who are like, that's not it.
Yeah,
That's
but it
not
worked out really well.
It worked out really well. Yeah, for sure.
Jason,
I think that's something though that artists like they have to do
Yeah.
if they want to stay. I don't mean relevant, but I mean just alive creatively. You've got to take a risk, and
For
sometimes
sure.
when you're talking about, I would imagine at that level when you're talking about those budgets, and maybe you can record an album and go, no, I don't like that. Let's start over. And maybe some bands have the funding to do that. A lot of people, most don't, and so it's a risk. And so But if they don't take that risk, then that's like the only thing worse than kind of like taking a risk and not working out is not taking a risk to me.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, now granted, I mean, I'm not the one who's losing millions of dollars, and maybe that's easy for me to say, Mr. No name Denton producer. But at the same time, I think that, I think bands need that. I would need that challenge and that risk to go, okay, let's just see what happens if I work with someone. And you were talking about collaborative, situations that worked. And I'm not thinking of a particular one in my head right now, but I do think there is something to getting a producer that, maybe has a reputation in another field and bringing them into a genre that they've not really worked at all. Or like a pairing that you're like, those two people write completely different types of music. Who was I'm forgetting who Jack White produced. Was it not Dolly Parton or was it?
I don't remember.
Someone,
He did a Beyonce song.
Oh, did he?
but
or
he
was
produced
featured on
someone's
it, but-
album that was
Yeah, I
like
forget
like
too.
an elder stateswoman or statesman of country music, and like
Yeah, he's done a couple cases like that, not
is it Dolly? I
specifically
can't remember.
country, but just going out and
Yeah.
like doing different.
Which is not. I mean,
different
that's not like
things.
that far removed. I just thought someone who's like kind of weird and indie and
Yeah.
kind of cutting edge, working with someone who's a lot older. I'm like, to me, that's a really cool idea,
Right,
and I'm
yeah.
probably you're going to come up with stuff that you just wouldn't if you were
Right,
kind of
right.
step with the usual suspects type.
Yeah, and
clients.
I think the idea that if you've put out just say 4 albums, do you want to put out a 5th album that just sounds the same, or do
Right.
you want to do?
And some
something new
bands, some
and-
bands do that, but I think
Yeah, and
the
you
ones
can,
that
but there's a point where I think like you were saying, you have to.
if they
try
don't
to
take a
reach-
risk, then your music starts. I think that's an internal posture that once you start doing that, it's like, well, we know this works, so let's do this. Then I don't know. Then music starts to become not fun.
Loretta
Yeah.
Lynn.
Loretta Lynn. Okay.
That was in 2004.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He just did that.
that's like
20 years ago.
Yeah.
dude, that's wild.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I was thinking like that was like he produced someone like recently.
No.
I just like totally
I just remember when that came out. I was like, he's working with now. It's like it's either Dolly Parton or Loretta Lynn. I was like, wow, you would have never put those people together.
Yeah, that's
in the
crazy.
years. But with him, it's like, sure, why not?
dang. Okay, so can you think of any pairings that didn't work? Artist producer pairings.
Incubus did a record with Skrillex as the producer. And
That sounds like a AI generated headline. today.
it was, yeah. I mean, you can imagine what it sounded like.
Yeah.
I can imagine where that might have been good.
Well,
Like,
yeah.
On paper, I can see how that pairing kind of could make sense.
Now
Yeah.
we're the way that I'm viewing this segment, if you will, is a little bit more opinionated, I suppose. Do you know if the
Yes.
band liked that?
The band loved it.
Really?
So
Okay.
Mike Einzinger, the guitar player, did a really famous song with Avicii, the famous deceased producer. I guess he's a producer. He's like
Yeah.
a.
Yeah.
But and I think they were longtime friends with Skrillex. So they were all really good friends with him, and they'd worked with Brendan O'Brien a lot, and I think they just wanted to do something kind of different. And so they are very happy with the record. But Incubus isn't a band that just does things because they need to do something.
Yeah.
They specifically do things because that's what they want to do. They could have stopped a long time ago, and each individual band member would be financially secure.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, that seems like a good case of like taking a risk and reaching for
Oh,
something
yeah.
new, and then maybe it doesn't pan out, but who
Yeah.
cares? It's the thing you made, and if you are, in their case, like proud of it and they like it.
Well, I mean, speaking of not necessarily ones that didn't work out, but speaking of Dave Cobb, Jason Isbell's Weather Vanes was produced by his band, Jason Isbell
Right.
and the 400 Unit, and not Dave Cobb, which is the first time in like 3 records, I
Yeah.
think.
Now, we can probably dive into that a little bit more in our next portion of the episode. But what is the like? Why give that clarification instead of just say they wrote the songs? Like, what is that? I don't understand why you have to clarify the producer part if it's not the engineer. It's kind of lost on me. It feels redundant, no?
Right.
But what am I might be missing a part of that.
Well, one, because like Dave said, Dave Cobb had been an instrumental part of his sound
Yeah.
for the last few albums, which are wonderful albums. But in the studio, I mean, it makes me wonder if okay, maybe they have been through the process enough times and they kind of learned from Cobb what works, what doesn't work, what they
Gotcha.
like, what they don't like, and they're like, maybe it was one of hey, let's do this ourselves, and meaning we're gonna pick the studio. We're gonna. I mean, because
Yeah,
again,
okay, yeah.
we're gonna pick the. I mean, we're gonna. I don't know what the songwriting process is for them. If Jason Isbell writes all the songs, or maybe it's a collaboration. I don't know enough about them to answer that question.
He writes all the,
The lyrics.
lyrics and most of the skeletons of all the chords
Okay.
and structures and stuff. But even Dave Cobb and some of the studio footage we've seen from that documentary of the making of the record previous to Weather Vanes, Dave Cobb is in there going like, "Nah, I wouldn't do it that long. Like, let's do the intro this way."
Yeah, and again, like it goes back to our original discussion. Was like, what is a producer? I mean, sometimes it's just someone who only shows up on day one of recording, but sometimes there's projects where I've been part of where I'm like, bring me your demos because we need to work on songwriting,
Right.
And we need to start at that point. And it's not because they weren't good; it's just that they'd never been in a studio, and writing a song on your acoustic guitar in your bedroom is not what's going to happen in a studio, and it wasn't translating. And I was like, you need to, which is another tangent we go on, but that wasn't the question you asked. But I don't know. I
Thank
think
you for respecting the question.
I think that you can. It could probably be like, hey, we want to take more ownership of how the album is going to sound, not just writing the songs, but we want to take ownership. We want to have a say in, we should do that chorus twice, or the tempo is too fast, or you should not use that big ribbon mic on your vocal. You should use this weird condenser. I mean, it's all these, somewhat technical decisions, but also maybe just like, we want the album to sound like this, and we'll just see if we can do it. And that the bands self-produce all the time. And I do think it's legitimate. It is a distinct process from just playing on stage and writing songs, because like I said earlier, yesterday when we started this podcast, it's this producer is someone
53
who
minutes.
Oh, okay. I know it was 53 minutes or 19 hours, one of the two. The producer is someone who often kind of plays the studio. That's their instrument. So
Right. Yeah. To go back to a pairing that I think did not work, and this is going to be controversial, I hope, is Bob Rock and Metallica.
Metallica?
I think that's a loser.
It got them their most popular record.
And everything else sucked.
Yeah.
And it got them their most popular record.
you mean the Black Album?
Yeah, that's their most popular one. And then he did Load and Reload.
And then came back for Saint Anger.
Started to do Saint Anger with
And then they fired him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And maybe they should have kept him because it wouldn't have been maybe as bad, but man.
Is he the reason why the snare sounds like that?
No, I think that's all Lars. That's all Lars. I think the Black Album is their most popular album because it's like the poppiest, but it still has like the same like qualities to me of a Metallica album that suck, which is like these songs go on for too long. Fucking figure out what you're trying to do and get there, and they just wrote like pop songs, so it was instead of 8 minutes, it was 5 minutes.
I love the Black Album. I love Load and I love Reload.
That's crazy.
But maybe
I
that's
feel like
because
that's just you. Yeah.
that's when I got in.
I
think
think
that's a big part of it is
I
Black Album,
hated
was
the
it?
Black Album when it came out
Really?
because I started listening. I went to see them on Injustice for All.
yeah,
Oh shit.
And
no bass.
yeah, and which at the time I didn't realize how bad it sounded. I just knew I loved the songs.
Yeah.
And then I heard the Black Album and I was like, what the fuck is this shit? This is pop metal. I hate this shit. And then over time, it started to grow on me and I realized, okay, I understand that argument that it's a sellout or whatever, a pop album, or it's not a good, but I'm like, okay, but for what the album is, the sound of that album really does sound phenomenal.
That's okay.
And that's another thing that a producer a lot of times is
Right.
tasked with is like, okay, not only are these great songs, but how does it sound? Well, that album sounds unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that's
Especially compared to Injustice for All.
that's for sure fair. Well, and the Injustice for All thing is not the producer's fault, because the producer of that album came out a couple years ago and was like, yeah, we had a meeting before the album was out, and Lars and James were just sitting behind me going, turn the bass down.
Yeah,
Turn the
exactly.
bass down. Turn the bass. No, turn it down. Turn it like. And so that was
like
it. Was
just
all
off.
them.
No,
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that album does sound good. I find that I don't think it's a sellout album. I don't think that it's bad that it's like pop metal. I think that it, like, as far as Metallica's like best work, I think that that put them on the wrong path.
That makes
I
sense.
think that it put them on a path of
Like superstardom, where they kind of lost touch with what they were about, or
and
You get a bunch of yes men telling them, "Yeah, that sounds great. You guys are good. You're making lots of money."
They tried to find their way back on Death Magnetic, and I think and that album has some stuff that's like that's pretty cool. But I think that like and of course, like I hate to go back to what I said before, which is like a band should be able to explore stuff. They should be able to, of course. And I'm I would never say Metallica shouldn't have explored that direction, but I think that it definitely took them on. They started that way, and they were like, well, I guess we'll just keep going that way because it made a bunch of money. Maybe I don't know if that's the reason why. I don't know.
I have a topic for another podcast
go
related
ahead.
to what you're saying.
Yes.
It's like what is the mechanism in play and when bands no longer have to like fight for it? And here's what I mean. I feel like a lot of times, sometimes the very first couple of albums by a band is like, man, that's amazing. But the recording quality is awful because they don't have any money and they don't have budget and everything. And then sometimes I've noticed when they get to a certain level of like comfort in terms of their sales and their prosperity and whatever, it's like, I just wonder if there's a relationship between not having to struggle and then the quality of the music that comes out. I'm not advocating like to be good, you have to starve, but I also don't think that I do think there might be some sort of relationship between like how much are you bleeding for this?
Yeah.
As opposed to, well, I guess we'll do another record, but if we don't, we're still going to maintain our lifestyle. I just wonder if that what impact that has on the creative process.
Yeah.
You can use that for another time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
how much you trying to like get out creatively versus just like this is just the job. Like
I
Metallica
just
needs
think
another album.
I mean, I don't think it's a function of age. I don't believe that. But I do think sometimes it's like when you are literally like starving and sleeping on someone's couch, and you're doing this because everything you have is going into this because your life literally depends on it, or at least your creative life. And sometimes I feel like that comes out, like the crucible of that creative process produces like sometimes some of their best work. Not always. Sometimes bands get better as they. I'm not making a generalization, but I just wonder, since if that's the case, because sometimes like how much you have to bleed for it, sometimes that yields a certain type of product, as opposed to sometimes when they get successful and they don't have to. Maybe they're not even aware of it. Like I said, I'm not making a generalization. I just wonder if that's a coincidence. I don't think it is a coincidence.
I think a big part of what ends up happening to artists is exhaustion, whether it's from the rigors of touring at a certain level of being a star, not to mention drug abuse.
Sure.
Like any of the substance abuse things.
Sometimes you can hear an album and go, well, the studio made them do this.
Right.
The studio
They had a contract to make another album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think I mentioned it on the show before. One of my favorite like math rock bands called Chon will never make another album again because they're stuck in a contract with Sumerian and they refuse. They will not make another. They're like, we do not want to be with you guys, so we're not going to finish our contract.
Wow.
And so they're just not going to make another. They're done. They're never. That's it. It's crazy. Yeah.
I think that was part of what happened with Tool in terms of them getting released from their first, like that's wondering why they were so long between their albums, because they were under contract from the first label and they were like, we don't want to work for these people. And so that's one reason why they take so long to make
Fear Inoculum or whatever.
Or no, it was
before that. It was like
Lateralis or something like that.
10,000 Days.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Whichever one.
Someone on the internet will correct me.
I'll never know. And I refuse to know.
I understand.
Just
I respect
like the
that.
label.
I refuse to ever know anything about Tool outside of what I already know.
I respect that.
That's enough for me.
Maybe that's another topic for a podcast.
Yeah, that sounds like a
Your
Patreon
problem with
episode.
Tool.
Why I don't like Tool and Dream
No,
Theater?
just make you listen to both of those.
Oh, sure. I could actually listen to a good amount of Dream Theater, but I have a lot of opinions about it. I've spent a long time
that's fair.
listening to a lot of Dream Theater, and I could say so many things. I think when it comes to like the pairing of producer and artist, I find that a lot of times, like when it's that strange thing, like when it's that one that just doesn't work, and again, it's a lot of times obviously going to be like a subjective thing, right? Because like you said, for Incubus's case, like they liked it, like the band liked it, which I would say maybe in many cases is more important than the fans liking it. But I think that it's it can be such a jarring thing for both people. And like you said, the artist has to do it to survive. They have to try something else. They have to go out there and explore some new kind of territory. but yeah, I think we've really gotten to a good place with this word, and that we haven't defined it still. I think I feel like but this is a conversation that I think can continue forever, right? As to how and what a producer is and does, which is what we're going to be doing on Patreon this week. So we're not going to live stream it, but for all of you who have made it this far, go join the Patreon if you haven't already, and you'll be able to see part 2 of this, where we also talk about songwriting. But before we move on and record our Patreon episode, we're going to talk about what we're listening to. So before we do that, does anybody have anything else they want to say about producers before we do this?
One pairing I would like to see stop is Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff.
Yes, fucking. Oh
But-
my god!
All right, if we're gonna go there, we
But-
can have a whole thing.
But it's working.
yeah,
it's working.
fuck,
It's
man.
clearly
It's
working.
working for everything that he's seemingly
clearly
involved
working.
in.
But here's the
people need to do another thing next. Like,
Yeah,
what's
right.
the next creative thing you want to go do?
I just don't really care for Jack Antonoff, and I've said that plenty
Same.
of times here. I just don't. I don't get it.
It's not new.
It's
for you to
not.
have that take,
It's beyond. I just am not.
I mean, I think it works, but it is starting to get old,
I forgot he
especially
was in
with
Fun,
certain
though.
artists.
I forgot he was in that band Fun,
Had a
and Fun's
Great,
good.
I had a good conversation about this weekend, actually. With
I did too.
A friend of the show, Olivia, talking about she didn't know who Jack Antonoff was in the
Okay.
context of a producer.
Yeah,
She knew him just from Fun.
Yeah. I was actually
Interesting.
talking about this with Jackson from the show for Big
a
Rips
friend of the show,
Jackson.
yeah.
And old co-host Big Rips. Anyway, he's still with us. Just we don't talk about him anymore. Anyway, we were talking about Jack Antonoff, and he's like, "I love Jack Antonoff," and I was like, "That's fucking crazy."
Yeah.
Like I
Out of all the people that we know,
loves him.
I'm surprised he likes him as
Who
much
did he
as
say
he does.
he hated? That was so shocking, but he loves Jack. I can't
know.
remember.
A lot
now.
of people.
He said no. He said he hated someone that I was like, wait, but you like Jack Antonoff? I couldn't remember what it was. Anyway, yeah, I'm right there with
So
you. on
did
that
you
one.
introduce him to Fun? Because that was
No,
before
no.
his time listening
He-
to music.
He said that he liked Fun. He listed
Yeah.
off stuff that Jack Antonoff had done that he liked. Fun being one of those. Like, oh yeah, fuck, I forgot about
Yeah.
Fun.
Because they were like best new band of the year at the Grammys or something.
Yeah,
and then they
yeah.
just never did anything else
and then
because he got busy.
man, Bleachers is a bummer. That album sucked. This one.
I haven't listened to it, but I've seen him going around doing press about it, and all everybody asks him about is what's the new Taylor Swift album, and he's getting frustrated as hell.
Oh,
about
that's pretty
that.
good.
Oh, whatever, dude. Boo fucking who.
'Cause people are like, "Are you the producer on
on.
that new album by her?" And
Yeah.
he's not answering the question. It's like,
That's
of course
good.
he is.
Fuck
Wah.
yeah.
He wants his band to be a thing now.
Oh man.
All right, what are you listening to, Adam? You want to go first?
Yeah, a band that I had never heard of, but Olivia introduced me to on our road trip this weekend. Rainbow Kitten Surprise.
Oh yeah,
Great
Who,
band name.
they're super cool.
They're super cool.
Yeah.
Been digging in all that. It's great, like indie rock, right?
Yeah.
Would be the right label for that. Just listening to a lot of unexpected music on a road trip, so that's the
Very
one that
cool.
stood out for me.
Did you listen to our road trip playlist?
We did not.
Ah, you
Motherfucker, what's the
bastard.
fucking point of making the road trip playlist if
got-
you're not gonna fucking listen to it?
It got shut down.
What did?
The playing your playlist. She had her playlist already planned out, so
Oh, my playlist.
it's you put it together. It's from the show, I know, but that was the best way
We
for me
did
to
this. This
explain
was a
this.
It was a
collaborative
collaborative effort.
Did you blame?
We
did
let
you
so many
say-
songs that should never be on a fucking playlist that you bullshit suggestions you gave us. We were like, Adam's a part of the
Did
show.
you-
We got to put it
Did
on
you
the
say
playlist.
we should listen to Hagen's
No,
playlist?
I didn't say that.
Oh, my
I said
God.
the podcast, and she said, "Oh, did Hagen do it?"
Oh my
Oh
fucking
my
God.
Which is not totally wrong. You did type it all in. But
It's not all my choices. Dave, what are you listening to? This is pissing me off.
I haven't been listening to anything new. I have. I'm not. I listened to Cody Jinks'
You're not
new
at liberty
record.
to say.
I listened to Cody
Talk about
Jinks' new record. I think I need to give it a couple more listens.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
That's the theme of my year.
Give it a couple more
Is
listens.
either
Couple
not
more listens.
listening to music or giving it more listens.
And I think the more listens has been working for you.
it has been every single
That's
time.
great. That's great.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and go, Chris, so you can go last. I've been listening to, and I believe I'm going to say this artist name correctly because it's spelled like the place in Texas, Waxahatchee. And she's great. She has a new album called Tiger's Blood, and it's like this kind of folk country rock record that's like really raw sounding in parts, and she's got a great voice, and I really like the songwriting. There's a couple of really big like standout songs, particularly Right Back to It, featuring MJ Lenderman, who is also a great kind of more rock-ish artist. But anyway, really like this album a whole lot. Tiger's Blood by Waxahatchee. And also a big favorite of mine, Man Man released a new single off their upcoming album, Carrot on Strings. The single is called Iguana. It is a great Man Man song that unfortunately goes a little too long, but it's really good. It's a great Man Man song. I'm very excited for the album. I didn't know they were doing something, and they're about to hit the road too for the new album, and they're gonna be in Dallas like a week after the album drops, so it's perfect timing. But yeah, that's what I got. Chris, what you listening to?
So I've been listening to a couple of artists recently. There's one that's actually from Canada.
Wow.
And it's a heavy band. I'm trying to remember. Someone recommended a band to listen to me, and then it recommended this band after I was listening to the band. And I don't remember what the first band was, and I'll probably remember it at 3 in the morning. But the band recommended was a band called Spiritbox from Canada. And I know they're not a new band necessarily, but their album, I think Eternal Blue.
So good.
I was like, man,
I
was like, wait a minute, I need to listen to that again. And so I was like, there's a lot of really great production is great on it. But I love heavy stuff. That's my love language.
There's no real drums on that.
I believe it.
No real drums on that.
I believe it.
They don't use real drums. So they released an EP last year called The Fear of Fear. It's like one of my favorite metal releases. There's 2 metal releases last year that they're the best. And that's one of them. And no real drums on it at all.
Interesting. I just think the production's great.
Incredible.
I think the song, I love the fact that she screams and sings. I think that's great.
I didn't know they were Canadian.
They are Canadian.
Yeah.
The amount of times we've talked about them on this show.
They are indeed Canadian.
And
well,
there's another,
the 2 main people are.
it's like a duo kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then another songwriter, which I watch the news all the time. My news, CBS News is on all the time at my house. And then on Saturday morning, a lot of times they just have like the music guest on their morning. And one time it was this girl named Courtney Barnett. And I was man, that's some great singing and some great songwriting. So I looked up her album and I started listening to that in the last few months. And she's a fantastic singer and songwriter. So I'm listening to her as well.
Very nice. Blake in the chat says, new Gaslight Anthem EP short stories is good. Blake, you were on the episode last week, so we're not going to put that in the list, but thank you for the suggestion.
Should have said it last week.
A week late.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for... Anybody got anything else before I take us out of here? All right, cool. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please like or subscribe to the channel, whatever you're listening to. Let's try this again. If you haven't already, please follow or subscribe on whatever podcast app you're using to listen to this. If you're on YouTube, like the fucking video, please and thank you. Subscribe to the channel. All these things, they help us out a lot, and they're free. It'd be awesome. Thank you so much. If you're on social media, we're DFTA Podcast on Instagram, Don't Feed the Artist on TikTok. Go follow those pages because I'm posting again, and it's working. Anyway, and if you have any topic suggestions for us, like Chris had for us today, please send us a DM on those social medias, or you can email us at feedback@don'tfeedtheartist.com. We would love to hear from you guys. If you give us suggestions, we will consider it because we would like to hear from you. And maybe there's a chance that we just need some help sometimes. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for listening. The part 2 of this episode will be on Patreon. So if you're not on our Patreon already, go to patreon.com/don'tfeedtheartist and you will find us. You can subscribe for $5 a month. You'll get some merch. You'll get some exclusive content. I am in the process of editing my gig vlog from last weekend. I think it's going to be a monthly thing where me and Dave take some footage from gigs, post it all. Oh, why are the lights flashing? Post it all into one place, and we'll have a cool little gig vlog once a month from from our month of gigs. So yeah, please join our Patreon. You'll get some cool exclusive content. Thank you guys so much. And it's quiet. Let's try that again. Hold on.
Fuck off! Get rid of town!
Thanks. All right. Whatever.